get it. Everyone has not had a great cookie cutter experience with HR. I get that some people don't understand a true function of what HR is. And that's what leads to the HR isn't there for your protection. However, I feel like that backfires a lot because then employees who've never given HR the chance holds information in. And then when something happens or a blow up happens, it's, well, what did HR do about it? Well, HR didn't even know about it. I can't do something about something I don't know.
Welcome to Problem Performers, a podcast about professionals who challenge the status quo at work. I'm Rebecca Weaver, and yes, I too have been labeled a problem performer at least once or twice in my career. But looking back, I now wear it as a badge of honor. In fact, all the most interesting people I know have earned this label at some point. In reality, these are the people who challenge their workplaces to be better and do better. I think we should all aspire to be problem performers in our work lives, because the only way to make real change is by shaking things up. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Problem Performers podcast. Today, I am really excited to have two incredible people here with me, Jazmine Wilkes and Kristina Minyard of BakedHR. I just love other HR people who are looking to kind of pull the curtain back and demystify the HR profession just a little bit. So I'm super thrilled to have Jazmine and Kristina here with me. Welcome. So let's get started. I mean, all great couples have a great origin story, right? So for the two of you who have teamed up so well for BakedHR, how did you two meet and how did BakedHR come to be?
I guess I'll take this one. So we met, which is actually funny. So both of us live in the same city. Well, not the same city, but very close in Alabama. And we both do a lot of work for our local HR chapter here in Alabama. And we actually met at a conference that was not in the state. We had to go out of state to actually meet each other in person for the very first time. And then after that, we, just formed a friendship, and we had been talking a lot about, we both do a lot of work in HR in our area, and we both received a lot of inquiries from HR students wanting to know how they can become an HR director 6 months after graduating college. And so we were like, you want to do what now?
Yeah. Not just any old director, but like an HR director for, a global company.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, a very typical career path.
So we decided to team up and really just between that and some other issues that we were seeing within HR, have some conversations. And like you said, let people see the insides of HR and the things that we go through, and remind employees that HR is also an employee of the company as well. And we decided to do it the Instagram and YouTube route.
Awesome. So now, Jazmine, tell me a little bit about your background. Do you have mostly HR generalist experience, or tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I officially started in HR, I believe in 2015. I got my first job in HR after graduating with my bachelor's in human resources as well. And got started in 2015 as an HR assistant. And then for the past few years, I've become an HR generalist in multiple forms: government, non-government, food industry. So that's pretty much all of my HR background.
Awesome. And Kristina, how about you?
So I started way before Jazmine started, and I always forget that we are not the same age until someone asks us this kind of question. I'm one of those people that got my start by accident. Started out doing temporary staffing. I had no idea what I signed up for, but I enjoyed it, and I was really good at it. And that kind of launched my involvement in this bubble. And then I accidentally left that and transitioned into government contracting. And so since Jazmine let y'all know that she graduated and then got her first job in HR, I worked in HR for probably 8 or 9 years before I got my degree. So I went back and got my degree later, but I've done, a lot of Department of Defense contractors. I've worked in that segment for probably the last 10 or 12 years. But I've also supported medical, public K-12, manufacturing, more professional type, corporate type roles as well. But most of my work has always kind of pulled me back to some kind of recruiting function. But I have been able to work my way up to HR and TA manager in the corporate setting.
That's fantastic. So for BakedHR, and you guys are coming up on your 1-year anniversary, is that right?
That's right. We're so excited. October 29th.
Congrats. That's so exciting. So when you think about the past year and your YouTube channel, the Instagram account, I know you guys yesterday on Instagram Live were kind of recapping your favorite posts and reels and all of that from the past year. As you think about this past year, what has stood out to you in terms of the message that is resonating most with your audience?
Wow, Jazmine, you want to take this first or do you want me to?
The most thing that I've seen is that managers suck. And
we are going right for it. I love this.
Okay. I think that it's been a very common thread through the feedback that we've gotten privately and publicly, that there's just not enough information out there about what HR's purpose is, and how to identify good HR and how to get better at HR. A lot of the type of questions that we are asked regularly from people who think they want to do HR for a career, or maybe they have started their HR career, but they don't know how to navigate a specialty or what to do next. It's just that they don't know where to look, which taps into a personal pain point for us, because as former, SHRM lovers, SHRM is the first thing that most people, recommend, because it's so recognizable, right? It's such a large organization. And so people think, well, they're the ones with all the answers. But unfortunately, after spending several years as kind of an insider in that loop, that's not our first recommendation. So we spend time with people and try to point them in different directions. But I think it's just the lack of information and the lack of transparency.
For people who aren't HR insiders like us, let's talk about SHRM just a little bit. SHRM stands for the Society for HR Management, and it is the largest professional organization for the HR profession in the United States. So SHRM is a terrible acronym, by the way. It's a terrible name. It sounds like a mushroom sitting in...
At least we've graduated from calling it SHRM to SHRM.
Okay.
It used to be known as shrimp.
Fair. Slightly better. But yeah, let's talk about, what is SHRM? And tell us a little bit about the roles that you've played in the past, or the role that SHRM has played for you.
Yeah. So when I got into my career path, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. So someone had told me, hey, why don't you check out your local SHRM chapter? Because SHRM is a global organization that's the Society for Human Resource Management, but they also have state and local affiliate chapters, depending on, where you're located. And so I had signed up for our local chapter and I went to some meetings to kind of learn. And I will say, as an entry-level person, there was a lot of good content to kind of build on. It never really turned into some expert level advising, which I think is something that's seriously lacking for us as professionals. But I just got involved as a volunteer locally, and then somehow ended up as a volunteer nationally, and did some social media work with them, and was on the blogging team for several years. Jazmine joined us on the blogging team at some point too, and started doing some different, not just the national conference, but some of the other, their talent conferences and things like that, to kind of help that were more geared towards young professionals. I guess I had already aged out of young professionals by then. But, it's kind of I talk about it as HR professionals, we have insight to the good and the bad of the company, right? Because, we are solving a lot of problems, or we're having to deal with a lot of things behind the scenes that the average employee doesn't see. I started feeling like that as a volunteer with SHRM too, because the more we dug in, the more we realized like their internal HR practices were terrible.
Yeah.
They were treating their people in an awful manner, and they were not following advice that we would typically see come out of the organization that was labeled a best practice. And so, that kind of caused a lot of distrust, and I backed off a lot. And Jazmine can tell you her perspective of that.
Yeah, Jazmine, what's been your perspective?
I've had this love-hate relationship with SHRM for the past few years. When I first started in my career, SHRM was one of the go-to places that I was directed towards as a HR newbie, as I like to call them. And SHRM appreciated at that time my perspective, because I was blogging for them from the aspect of being someone new to HR and directing people to their site and to the organization. And so they were very much, let's, get on the blog squad, did some conferences, like Kristina said. And then it got to the point where, SHRM wouldn't listen to what we were asking them. They wouldn't respond to the hard-hitting questions, I guess you could say. And we, not just Kristina and I, but a lot of HR professionals require more from SHRM, more that they should have been, happily giving if they are so on, the leaders of human resources and should be the organization that directs us. So after a few years, we just decided to no longer, blog for them. And then it got to the point where we, didn't go to conferences. We now actively try to find other ways to get people help when they have HR questions, but it's very hard because SHRM, especially in the last few years, they've taken more of a commercial type aspect where you've seen them more on TV, you've seen them more coming out in the press. And so a lot of people know SHRM, and they're like, oh, let's just go to them. But we want people to not just use them. I mean, unless you value what they're saying, then you do you.
Well, I am very much in that camp as well. My experience over the course of my career, and I think I probably beat you both out. It was 22 years of experience myself, but I also fell into HR. I didn't start in HR. I started in internal communications and thought I was going to do like the sexy public relations or something like that, and sort of fell into HR. And over the course of my career, as I continued to progress, there were parts of the job that I loved. And at a couple different points, I thought about getting my certification. And in two different times with two different bosses in two different companies, my boss actively talked me out of it. Actively talked me out of even pursuing it. They're like, it is a waste of time. You've already reached a high level within the organization. It's going to be worthless to you, blah, 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 which is pretty harsh. But, it's pretty eye-opening, I think, as well. And then I would say for me personally, over the past couple of years to see, SHRM is the 800-pound gorilla within our profession. It's massive, and it's really there are a couple of other places you can do a certification, but they're definitely the largest. And I think it's been, from what I understand, a huge part of their business model as well, is really around this certification process. But also, like, for a profession, they're supposed to be the voice of HR for the country, and current CEO, Johnny C. Taylor, Jr., right?
Yep.
Is very much about seeking the spotlight, which in and of itself, I personally don't have a lot of issue with. I mean, we all do it in our own way. And I think having more of a spotlight on HR is inherently a good thing. However, I've also personally been really, really dismayed to see him actively aligning himself with the Trump administration, and then, him as the figurehead for this organization refusing to take action with Black Lives Matter, or waiting way too long, to make statements like that. So for me, it is just incredibly disappointing. And it feels like a huge void for so many of us not to have a professional organization that really represents our values and, represents what we want to accomplish with this with our profession.
We could do a whole episode on all of my thoughts and concerns with the certification process, the split between SHRM and HRC. I mean, we really could. But I agree with you 100%. And I just you cannot convince me that if you don't, as a human, care about other people's basic human rights, that you're going to be good at HR.
Absolutely.
I just can't believe it. And when you refuse to take a stance on important issues like that impact who we are as whole people in this world, then you're not ready to provide this function as a support to businesses.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have not seen any real meaningful support on transgender rights within the workplace. I mean, there's just been absolutely nothing. And this really, what I would love to see is HR leading on these things, having HR as a profession out in the forefront. And again, leading with the values that I think, at least the HR professionals I know, that really matter to us.
Right.
Let's go back to BakedHR for a few minutes. I was loving your post yesterday and your Instagram Live where you guys are recapping your favorite memes and reels from the past year. So it was actually a meme that connected us. I got really excited about one that you posted. So Kristina, because I think this maybe made the list as one of your favorites, right?
It did.
Can you describe it for everybody? And then I will explain how excited I got about it.
So it was one of our spooky season memes that we've been having fun with. And we totally committed to having some kind of Halloween themed or something scary for our memes for the whole month of October. And so this one is actually from Megan Thee Stallion's pumpkin photo shoot that she did, which I have no idea why she did it, but I love the photos. So I used them. And she's actually flipping the camera off with her little pumpkin head on, and she's wearing her FU or F off rings. I can't remember.
Yep.
And it says something along the lines of, when another employee says HR is only here to protect the company. And then our caption was that, we were turning off the comment. We were not taking any questions at this time, which is so funny. And another reason why I love that we're having this conversation, because you were like, so I understand you're not taking any questions, but I have a question.
Totally. So I just slid right into your DMs instead and was like, all right, fine, no comments. But I did. I got really excited because it's at the heart of this issue that I have had. I've had this conversation over and over again, and I've been dying to have a good, healthy debate with some HR professionals about this very issue. So for the record, I am also very much on board with Megan Thee Stallion and having her pumpkin head and all its wacky weirdness. But yeah, so I did. I DM'd you and got really excited and said, hey, will you come on the podcast and talk to me about this? So this whole idea, if we can dive into it, HR is just there for the company, not for the employees. It frequently, when I hear this conversation, it also then kind of devolves very quickly into this HR is evil and they're out to get us, which makes absolutely no sense to me. It is definitely not at all the position that I would argue for. But I would love to hear, just even before we get into that, so what made you want to post that? It's definitely your favorite. You said still not taking comments. What is it about that particular point of view for you?
while I can fully admit and come clean that we have a lot of issues to sort out in the profession, and we have probably a lot of people in this role who do not deserve to be in this role, that is not, our purpose is not just to protect the company. And I think we hear that a lot. We see that in advice. Don't go to HR. HR is not your friend. We're not here to say that we are your friend, but we're here to kind of define our role for you and tell you what you can use us as a resource for, and understand that if it's probably good for you, then it's probably good for us too, because we don't own the company. We don't have any special privileges that you don't have. Like, we are employees just like you. We just have different tasks that we're responsible for. And so when I see that, especially when I see like HR professionals try to like kind of pump up that advice that don't go to HR, it's so infuriating. Why don't we spend that time working with HR professionals on how to be better at HR than just out here weaponizing this idea that we're not here to do a good job and keep employers out of trouble and take care of employees? Like, it's possible to do both in a way that benefits all parties involved.
I think that is a point for sure that gets lost, that HR is an employee too. And so I think people forget that sometimes. And there is for sure a bit of shooting the messenger. People forget that HR is most of the time not a decision maker, especially when it comes to pay and benefits, when it comes to who's getting promoted, when it comes to what action you're going to take on an investigation. Like, HR makes a recommendation, and it's a fully informed, hopefully well-informed recommendation as well. But it's ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a recommendation. And very, very seldom, at least in my experience, does HR actually have the ability to make the call or make the final call on those things. I think that gets lost in this conversation as well. Jazmine, what's been your experience?
I kind of think that gets lost, the fact that HR is, not your friend. HR is an employee. I think it gets lost because a lot of times when maybe you see a statement coming out from a company who has done something wrong. There was one recently that my mind is gone. I can't remember who it was. But instead of the company or the CEO apologizing for it, the apology came directly from HR, even though there was nothing directly tied to HR about this. Like, HR didn't make this decision. It was something being manufactured. And I'm sure, as a person who has worked in HR manufacturing, HR probably didn't even know what was being created until they saw the press release and was like, oh, you probably shouldn't have done that, but
right.
There we go. We'll figure this out. But I really do dislike that idea. And this conversation always comes into the HR is not your friend category. And to that, I always ask, is finance your friend? Is recruiting your friend? Why is it directly tied to human resources in which someone should be a friend? If you make friends at work, great. If you can set those boundaries and you can have that relationship and they happen to work in HR, then fine, go for it. But that does not make the department of an organization your friend. And why are we going back and forth with just the conversation of, is HR your friend? And not anyone else or any other department in the organization.
Yes. Is marketing your friend? I mean, I think about that for a while. I like that. We'll be right back. Restaurant workers suffer the highest rates of harassment of any industry, and it's only gotten worse since the pandemic. HR Uprise is responding with 86 Harassment. 86 Harassment is a coalition of restaurant leaders who want to eradicate harassment in their workplaces. Members receive resources and support from HR Uprise to help prevent harassment before it starts, including anonymous reporting software, independent investigations, confidential HR coaching, templates and tools to help you build more inclusive company practices, and ongoing training in harassment prevention and allyship tactics that are engaging, fun, and actually work. If you're a restaurant owner, reach out to us for a free consultation at hruprise.com/86harassment. Here's part of the issue for me. I don't like it when I hear the HR is not your friend. But I will say since creating HR Uprise, one of the things that has really struck me over and over again is how frequently I hear from people and they use almost word for word the same phrase, and they say they feel like they were burned by HR. And it's almost burned is the phrase they use over and over again. And I find it so fascinating that people will tell me their stories and, they've endured really horrific harassment and discrimination within the workplace. They go to HR, they feel like it doesn't go anywhere. And then what's likely is that, what's happening behind the scenes is HR very well may be going to bat for them. But HR also has this responsibility to toe the company line. And so they may or may not see any resolution to their issues. And to hear people saying, I feel burned by HR over so many times, that's the part that I kind of keep coming back to. And I can certainly understand people feeling this deep pain they feel like it wasn't listened to, it wasn't resolved to their satisfaction. And frequently they don't feel listened to either.
Okay, so you said something in that HR is supposed to toe the company line, and I absolutely do not think that that's our job. I don't think that's our job at all, because I think if I know something and if you want to look at a legal risk as far as employment, and maybe an investigation not being done thoroughly, or they feel like something wasn't done correctly and they don't know what HR has done behind the scene, it's not my job to just do what the CEO tells me what to do in that incident. It's my job to tell that CEO what I know and what the risk is of choosing the path that they want to choose. So for me, when I'm in a situation like that, I'm never thinking, what's the company line here? I'm thinking, how do we resolve this issue for all parties involved? And how do we make sure that we do it in a legal manner that benefits, whoever needs to benefit from the solution of this? And so I think that that's also a misconception, that people think that, just because HR didn't do something, that means that they just fell in line with the company, which could also feed back into what you were saying earlier. We're typically not the decision maker. We're advising. We're in an advisement role a lot of times when it comes to issues like that. However, I'll say also that, if I'm giving them a solution that they don't want to act on and it doesn't align with my values, I will submit my notice and not think twice. That's just the kind of person I am. And I know that not everyone has that freedom and flexibility. Sometimes you have to stay in a job that doesn't align with your values, but that doesn't mean that they didn't do everything they could to protect you and help you and resolve that the way that it should have been resolved. The other thing you said was everyone has a story about being burned by HR. So I also think this, if you look back into, how employment legislation has changed in the last 20, 30, 40 years, HR hasn't always been a function that was needed. And there's a difference between what we saw as personnel departments and what we see as human resources departments. They have slightly different functions. And I'm also one of the people, I don't care what you call us. I really don't care what you call us. But the point of that being, a lot of organizations saw an opportunity to move someone internally at the organization out of necessity because laws started being implemented that they had to comply with, that no one was experienced with and no one was prepared for. And you've got to look at how far behind the education system is in creating a degree once the workforce creates a demand for those skills. So I think that there's something to be said about the period of time that we're in when we're still a little hazy on who was formally trained and who has worked in their career without HR and then with HR, and the differences that causes in how we understand the role and how we were prepared for the role. And so I think hopefully we'll see something different over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years.
I hope so too. Okay, you just said so much. I want to go back and dive into some of this, because this is exactly what I was hoping to get to. So earlier on, you said, talking about HR towing the company line. And I think I agree with you. I was never in a place where I literally thought to myself, oh, what's the company's position on this? At least that I can remember. However, I would say I certainly did not feel. So let's take the example of an investigation. Somebody, claims some kind of misconduct within the workplace. Let's say I investigate it. I have a clear recommendation that we should terminate the person who is accused. Let's say it's a manager. And my clear recommendation is that we should terminate that person. And then the CEO doesn't agree. Am I going to go back and share that information with the person who brought the allegations forward? Most likely not, right? Because that creates a whole other legal issue for the company. And my argument has always been that, of course, HR is always looking. This is what I coached my teams for years over, was we're always striving to find the solution that is both best for the company and best for the employee. And in a situation like that, it probably is best for us to fire that person. If there's clear misconduct happening, that's the best thing for both the company and the employee. But if there's a conflict between what's best for the employee and what's best for the company is going to win out every time. The CEO ultimately gets to make that decision about what's going to happen. And yes, so the second part of this, that we'll get into is what's HR's recourse when you run into these issues. But before we get to that, ultimately, part of what changed it for me was sitting through and thinking how many times I thought to myself as I'm talking to an employee, man, I really wish I could tell you the full story. I really wish I could tell you the whole story about why you're not getting this raise and why that other person did, or why we're not taking action, or why it looks to you like we're not taking action with this misconduct issue, or right on and on and on. So that's ultimately what flipped it for me, is that, yes, it's not HR's only obligation, but it is a primary obligation, is to protect the company. It's mitigating risk for the organization. And it was thinking through all of those conversations with employees that really flipped it for me.
So, that's mitigating risk for the employer ultimately, but it's also kind of mitigating risk for the productivity of the employees and the employees' well-being, because if you could tell them everything, then they would try to navigate it all themselves, and then there would be pure chaos. So, I can see that where we can file it away under that. But I always look at it as I'm here to serve the employees. And so when I make a decision to only share this amount of information, why am I making that decision? Because it's confidential. Why is it confidential? Well, because they wouldn't want me to share it with anyone else, if it were about them. So not just about I don't want to give you enough information that you can come back and successfully sue the company. But if I think I'm hiding something that you could successfully sue the company for, I'm probably not going to be there much longer.
Right. Yeah. Jazmine, what's your take?
I'm very much, even before I sign a contract to start as an employee with someone in the HR role, I tell CEO, my HR manager, whoever it may be, first of all, I'm not going to jail for you or this company. So let's start there. Okay.
Good place to start. Yeah.
So I have had, and I get it, everyone has not had a great cookie cutter experience with HR. I get that some people don't understand a true function of what HR is, and that's what leads to the HR isn't there for your protection. However, I feel like that backfires a lot, because then employees who've never given HR the chance holds information in. And then when something happens or a blow up happens, it's, well, what did HR do about it? Well, HR didn't even know about it. I can't do something about something I don't know. And we've seen that experience over and over again. I've also had to have hard conversations with employees on why they didn't get a promotion, but someone else did, just using that example. One thing I tell employees all the time, at least for me, is I'm going to give you every piece of information that I can. Because I want you to truly, when you leave my office, I want you to understand whether you think it's the correct way or the wrong way. I still want you to understand the decisions that have been made. If that gets the company in trouble, then that's something that the company is going to have to deal with. You can't just sit here and at the end of the day, we are affecting the way that people live. These jobs are how people put food on their table and their bellies. It's how they decide to go from point A to point B. It does not have to be a passion in life for them, but it is a job. It is something that we have on paper promised them when we hired them on. So I feel like as HR, we have to be as open as possible that we can. And yes, sometimes that means we can't give away all of the information. But like Kristina said, do you want me to share this information about you if you were that other employee?
Yeah. Yeah. So the second part of what you talked about, Kristina, that I wanted to dive into is this idea of like, what does HR do? If you run into this problem of an unethical or even, sometimes illegal. I feel like it's a little more clear-cut when the behavior is illegal and not just unethical, at least for me. But I've experienced both as an HR professional. And I think that is one of the challenges of this role is, what is your recourse? We talk about HR is not the final decision maker. If you do run into that, I would say in my experience, I've never reached a point where I felt very strongly about something and said, this is what we need to do. And I was told to actively sweep misconduct under the rug. I've never been in that situation. I know I've talked to quite a few HR people who have, but I personally have never been in that situation. But what I did run into was an organization that was taking action that I just couldn't, I couldn't abide by it. For me, it was the CEO was planning another round of layoffs. It told me the day that I told him I was pregnant with our second child, he told me I was going to be laid off. And so, and that was
He told you were going to be laid off because you were pregnant with your second child?
Oh, no, of course he didn't say it exactly like that. It was in the same conversation, though, right? It was, hey, so I'm pregnant. And then like later in this like update, oh, and by the way, you're going to be included in this layoff. And so, right. And so for me, like, again, it was, first of all, if I stick around, like, yes, I could get some severance apparently, as part of this layoff, but people are going to assume that me as the head of HR for this organization, they're going to assume I had something to do with this layoff. And I can't live with that. I don't want that, as part of my professional reputation. And so I ultimately quit. I quit before we got to the layoffs. And so looking back at that experience, it's so interesting because it really was the only recourse I had at the time. Or I could have, stuck it out. And like you said earlier, I was really fortunate and very privileged, I should say, to be in a position where my family and I had savings that we could live off of for a while because I was a primary breadwinner for us. And also, by the way, being pregnant is not a great time to look for a job. It should be.
Why is that, Rebecca? Why?
It should be, but it's not.
Maybe now in this remote world, because
maybe
no one sees you when you walk in. Okay, that's also another episode. Yep. Sorry.
That's a whole other episode, right? But, I think about this, like, that really is, I think in so many ways, our only recourse if we're working for an organization that's unethical. Like, right? I mean, what do you guys think?
Sometimes you have to, sometimes you do have to make the hard decision, if you can, to leave an organization. We have had to tell a few people that in our DMs because they've come to us and be like, hey, should I just quit this job? And be like, wait a minute now. We cannot tell you to quit a job. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know what's going on. I can't support you if you say, come back and say, hey, BakedHR told you to quit your job. But sometimes you have to make that hard decision and see if that is something that you are able to do. That's where it comes in with having a great network, maybe, that you can find something in the meantime to do. Although then you get this person has job talk from point A to point B when that comes up on resume. But I just think sometimes you have to make the difficult decisions, and sometimes that's saying goodbye, especially when you know something is against your values or your morals that you have been raised on or live by, or whatever they may be.
So I think that there's a lot of variables in this, right? Because it depends on the structure of the organization. Because I would say, like, if you are in a position where maybe you report to a VP or maybe you report to an executive and they are making a decision to go against your recommendation and you firmly believe that's the wrong decision, is there a board of directors that you can take this to? Is there another option? Do you have a policy that states what you are able to explore as an alternative route? Because some larger organizations will have paths like that already defined because they've already been through this before. Also, do you have a good employment attorney on retainer that you can call and say, hey, I need you to present the facts from, your perspective. Here's what we're dealing with. What would you advise that they do? And so sometimes, having HR and the attorney on the same page can get them to change their mind. There is like you said, it's way more clear cut whenever it's like illegal versus unethical. It's easier to make proper case when there is a black and white, descriptor there. But when you're dealing with something unethical, it depends on what you're doing there, right? Because I feel like my reputation as an HR and talent acquisition person is I will come into your organization, I will break everything down that's not working, and we will rebuild in a way that will make your workplace better and, help your recruiting strategy and your retention strategy. And sometimes that means addressing those unethical behaviors head on. And maybe no one told you before that they're unethical, because there can be some, ambiguity there. But if you repeatedly try to change an unethical belief and you get nowhere, then that might be the time for you to say, okay, bye, I'm out of here. I've been in some of those situations where I thought I was making progress with the leadership team or the owner of the company. And we went through rounds and rounds. I mean, just using compensation as an example, you have to have a good, strong compensation strategy. And when I've advised you several times on why this is not working, why you can't pay a certain type of person less than another certain type of person in the same field, and we're 6 months in and you're still not adjusting and you're just making excuses, then I realized you don't really want to learn from me. You just wanted me to come in and take care of these other things. And so that's when you have to kind of reflect and be like, okay, well, yeah, now I probably do need to leave.
Yeah. For me, with a different company, it was being asked to do layoffs one too many times where we weren't offering any severance to people. And it was like round after round, and like I couldn't do it anymore. And to me, it feels like an ethics issue. Yeah. Yeah. And even when all the stars are aligned and you get to offer that severance package, it's still not easy to lay off a bunch of people. It is the absolute worst part of the job, I'm convinced. Absolute worst part. Yeah. I so appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff. Because, again, these are the conversations that I was looking to have more often, that I was looking for those when I, first created HR Uprise on Instagram. It was like this kind of dialogue that, the HR profession is not an easy one, and it's only gotten harder. The past couple of years, we have now heaped on all these expectations for HR professionals. And, it's a big part of the reason why I created the coaching platform with HR Uprise, which is, For all of us who work in HR, we play that HR phone a friend role, right? For friends and family who are going through an issue, or maybe they're looking for a new job, or they have some kind of workplace issue, they call up their HR friend and say, hey, what do we do? And I think this is really the crux of the issue for me. Like, what I find magical about that HR phone a friend scenario is HR does not have to worry about their obligation to the company at that moment. They don't have to worry about like, oh, I'm not going to tell you everything. I don't have to, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just say, hey, here's what you need to know. Here's the documentation you should keep. Here's some questions you should ask. Here's how you can protect yourself, because they don't have to worry about that obligation to the company. And it is that, I call it the double bind of HR, right? That is like, we're both trying to support company culture and support the organization and mitigate risk for the organization at the same time. And most of the time, hopefully in a good scenario, you can do that well. But I think there are too many times where those two obligations just conflict. And again, that's why I created the coaching platform for HR Uprise, was to give access to that HR phone a friend on a much larger scale for people.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And I think obviously there's a need for it because, like Jazmine has said, we get random DMs, we get random emails, and it's like people genuinely seeking HR advice. And we're like, oh, they think that we're But I think, earlier also you said, like, I decided to quit because I didn't want people to think that I was part of this decision. And this is another reason why I get so frustrated when people think that, HR is only going to do what the company tells them to do. Because at the end of the day, Jazmine mentioned, you've got your network, you're going to try to look for another job. You become known for whatever HR type of person that you are. And so it's not just, oh, I left that job, I can leave how I behaved at that job. Yeah. That's the kind of HR person that is. Do we want that kind of HR person on our team? So it's part of people see you doing HR, how you want to present yourself. So you've got to keep that in mind too. And if that's that extra push you need to be like, okay, I'm not just here for the company, like this could impact my career. We know how fast news travels. Yes.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I cannot thank you both enough for being willing to dive in to the weeds of the HR role with me. Tell me before we go, where can people find BakedHR? And then either or both of you, where can they find you online and connect with you?
Well, you can find BakedHR on Instagram at BakedHR. You can also find us on YouTube. If you just search BakedHR, we'll pop right up there. So you can see all of our full videos that we have with guests as well. And then if there's ever a time that you want to ask us a question or a topic, then you can email us at bakedhr@gmail.com. And then if you are looking for me specifically, I don't know why you would be, but if you are, you can find me pretty much at HR Jazzy. You see, like, I don't even use my Twitter handles that much anymore or anything like that. But you can find me at HR Jazzy, and that's HRJAZZY.
And you can find me as HRecruit everywhere, HRecruit, HRecruit.co, and HRecruit on all of the social media platforms.
Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you again for the conversation, and we'll see you on Instagram.
Thank you.
Problem Performers is a production of HR Uprise Media, part of an organization built around a single question. What if you could have HR that works for you rather than your boss? Well, now you can with your own HR Uprise coach. Get affordable, confidential advice from an experienced HR pro who works only for you. And hey, employers, we've got you covered too. HR Uprise provides independent investigations, harassment prevention training, private employee coaching, and much more. Email us at hello@hruprise.com or visit our page at hruprise.com. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.